Welcome back to Sunrise Daily. So, lots of things going on in the polity at the moment, and yes, indeed, you saw chief of which the acting president's birthday, the FEC also celebrating him there. But then we're going on and focusing on development in the country. We also do know that Abuja Airport about now can fly there for now. We're joined this morning by Ms. Adetokunbo Obayan, who is a leadership consultant. Thank you for coming on this morning.
Oh, it's a pleasure.
Well, you also did come in from Abuja. How was it?
I came in on Tuesday. I went to Abuja on Tuesday morning. I had to come back on Tuesday evening because I wasn't ready to make the trip to Kaduna unless it was absolutely necessary. And the airport was very crowded. In fact, it was like ticket prices were jumping through the roof. And it was as if there was an exodus from Abuja. When we got into the departure lounge, the place was full. I mean, to find a seat was a problem. Mm. I was like, every flight was fully booked. Everybody was trying to get out. And many people I met there had actually come in that morning to try and do whatever they had to do and get out.
The same morning?
The same day. In fact, quite a few of them said that unless something absolutely important happened, they would not be in Abuja for 6 weeks.
So you'll be looking at the next 6 weeks before you make a journey.
Yeah, something
you can accommodate that.
Something has to motivate me. I actually met some people who said that their families are in Abuja, but they've told them they would see them in 6 weeks' time.
Whoa.
That was how serious
6 weeks' time.
Because the idea of traveling to Kaduna, I mean, ironically, the other day I went to Kaduna about 2 weeks ago and went to Abuja from Kaduna, and I could understand the inconvenience it can be. It's not, I mean, when you say Kaduna to Abuja is 2 hours, you're just talking of the main roads. You still have to get out of the city, and you still have to get into the other city, fundamentally. So actually, you should give yourself about 3 hours, technically. And you imagine 3 hours, if I leave from certain places, I'll get to many places in 3 hours. So it's an inconvenience that I hope that it was well thought through and necessary, because there are many complications that it has led to. And you want to get out of the place, you now have to start calculating. In fact, I met somebody at the airport who was coming from Lokoja and went to Abuja and flew from Abuja to Lagos and was now considering how to get back to Lokoja. So I had to give them an alternative advice that Benin might be closer than going to Kaduna to come to Lokoja. Benin, Lokoja is 3 hours, whereas Kaduna, Lokoja is about 5 hours. So, and they began to consider it. So it's actually a lot of inconvenience for Nigeria. So I hope that the 6 weeks will not become more than 6 weeks, because the expense of the inconvenience is serious, apart from the risk to life and property going on the road. Sometimes decisions are made. I believe there's an attempt to comfort us and to tell us that these decisions have been well thought through, but I would probably have preferred to have seen what other alternatives were pursued, rather than. And you see, sometimes when you in decision making and leadership, sometimes it's easier to take a decision and then begin to justify your decision.
So how should they have done it? Alongside that announcement,
they should. I would have expected what the other alternatives were. What was pursued? Was there a way of creating another artificial runway at a temporary one, for example? I'm not saying there was none. I actually suspect there was. I mean, I used to be an engineer, but I'm saying, but give me that as it may, in practice, in reality, if you want to persuade us, then there needs to be an awareness that it's an inconvenience. One of the biggest challenges we sometimes have in Nigeria is that when we communicate decisions, we communicate them as fait accompli. And then we justify them without recognizing the inconvenience to the people who would have to go through it, that it's a real inconvenience. It's not just a question of telling me the road will be safe, we're putting security measures in place. Whatever road and security measures put in place would not account for 3 hours. 3 hours.
This move was not a politically motivated one, do you think?
There are many questions about whether it was. A lot of Nigerians actually wonder whether it was, because they're not sure. The logistics and the logic is what has a lot of people beaten. I mean, we're spending 5 billion naira fixing the runway. I know that Gombe Airport, even though it was at a different time, the whole of Gombe Airport was built for 7 billion naira at the time. And the terrain is not too different. In fact, I understand that that's one of the reasons why the second runway was suspended, because the costs had overrun. And you're just wondering, would it have been possible to do and invest that in a second runway in a short term? Would it have been possible to do other things? So sometimes when you're communicating, you open the door for suspicion as to what the motivation is when you do not...
Inadvertently, or you should do that deliberately?
I'm saying that you can open the door for suspicion inadvertently or deliberately. I'm not sure what you because sometimes when you are not open and the conversation is not an open conversation. For example, we need to shut Abuja airport. Yes, that's a need. What are the alternatives? Then we need to have that communication. When the alternatives, it becomes obvious to us that the alternatives are not that serious, then you're conveying to the people an awareness of their inconveniences. There are a lot of people who will end up going to Kaduna Airport and taking a helicopter ride to Abuja. And I have a suspicion a lot of people in top government levels will do that. And so the man on the street is not going to face the everyday driving between Kaduna and Abuja. And we must not forget that in Nigeria, regardless of what road safety has been doing, and they've been doing quite a lot of work, our roads are still very dangerous.
You know, there are lots of people who ask questions about our communication and leadership styles and quality, because, I mean, sometimes, you know, when you are on the other side, you may see things differently, and then we see them when they get into government, they see things differently. Because maybe they now have the benefit of information having been in government compared to what they thought was the case when they were not in government. What do you think we really are lacking here? Because one of the most recent cases happens to be, look at the U.S. immigration policy, as a matter of fact, the way that also came across. What are we actually missing in communicating to the people in terms of this is what we want to do?
I think first of all communication starts from one clear big problem. What's the message you intend to communicate? And one of the big challenges we have, I've said this many times on channels, is that I find out that we as a people have a tendency to look for shortcuts to the solution. In other words, we start talking without thinking of the long-term implications of what we're saying. Take the issue of the travel ban. For example, when somebody gets up and says that all Nigerians who don't have any necessary thing to do in the U.S. should not travel to the U.S. at that particular time. That statement almost smacks paternalistic, almost like, what are you going to do there? First of all, I wouldn't go to the U.S. and spend whatever hundred thousands of naira to fly to the U.S. if I had nothing to do there. There must be a respect for what I have to do. There is a tendency, I think that leads to that big challenge. Number one challenge is our communication style is driven by our awareness of the communication receiver. And one of our challenges as a people is the concept I call locus of focus. That is, Nigerians have a tendency to see things as they affect them and the people around them, rather than looking to the distance. I call it locus of focus, a concept I developed, which means to do, and the idea is how far do you see? Now, it affects us when it comes to communication, because we tend to then interpret everything from the viewpoint of where I stand, rather than from the viewpoint of where the person I'm talking to stands. Because when you communicate from that, it affects the differences in your communication. What I see and what affects me may not affect you. But if I can go beyond myself, and it affects people when they go into leadership in Nigeria, because what I find in Nigerians is that when they are not in positions of authority, they are heavy grumblers. They're not aware of what is happening on the other side. And when they now move into position of authorities, they're also heavy grumblers, but they are grumbling again about the other side. So they look at all the other people as nuisances who have no direct implications on them, because they are not able to see beyond the distance. And that's the biggest challenge in our communication. I can't communicate with you unless I can see where you're standing. And it starts to affect us in terms of our decision making and our communication. I mean, let's even assume that Nigerians should not go to America because it's a travel ban, which is not true, because even the first travel ban did not exclude Nigerians. But what did happen, which could have happened, although the American embassy has said it didn't happen, was that because so much power was given to immigration officers, and my general observation is that when you give security men too much power, they abuse it unconsciously. But because so it's possible that there could have been a miscarriage. But it didn't mean, therefore, that Nigerians should therefore not go to that country.